Hello and welcome to Impact the Borough, a podcast from the Greensboro Chamber of Commerce. I'm Brince Manning, President and CEO of the Greensboro Chamber of Commerce. Each week, a Chamber staff member will sit down with a guest to discuss what we're doing to start and grow businesses, create quality jobs, develop our workforce, and tell the inspiring story of Greensboro to the world. This podcast is brought to you by Truliant Federal Credit Union. As one of the largest credit unions in North Carolina, Truliant is proud of its work supporting the businesses and the people that make our communities thrive. Chartered in 1952, today Truliant serves more than 250,000 members, helping them and our community build strong financial foundations. There are 5 locations in Guilford County to serve you. Visit truliant.org for more information. In response to the COVID-19 pandemic, we at the Chamber are working with community partners to mitigate its effects on businesses, both large and small. Each weekday at 3 p.m., we are hosting a daily action call with various experts who can point you to resources and answer questions. In lieu of our regular podcast episodes, we will be sharing highlights from these calls with you each week during this unprecedented time. To hear these discussions in full or to join future calls, visit greensboro.org/COVID-19.
All right, folks, let's go ahead and get started. I have 3:02, and I don't want to keep our guests today waiting too much longer, so I will go ahead and get us started. I'm Brent Christensen with the Greensboro Chamber of Commerce. Again, welcome to our daily action calls. It is Friday. We've made it through another week that seems like a month, but we have made it, and today is the day when we have started to see applications being taken for the Paycheck Protection Program. Our guest will talk a little bit about that. I can tell you that those of y'all who were listening in yesterday who heard Derek Ellington join us, Derek sent me a text just a little bit ago that said, since 8 a.m., when their applications went live, they have processed 60,000 applications worth $6 billion. So the application process has begun and is going strong. And so we wanted to make sure that we got everyone totally understanding what is going on with the CARES Act. Yesterday, we talked very specifically a lot about the PPP, the Paycheck Protection Program. And so we wanted to back up just a little bit right now and talk about just in general the CARES Act, the major provisions, the implementation, and as you can see on your screen, the resources that are available. So thank you for joining us. You can follow us on social media, on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at GSO Chamber for the latest information. We'll also be sending out these daily emails to our members and recording the call with any relevant links. We'll include that in the email. And if you're not a member and you're on this call, all links to the resources and the recordings will be on our website at greensboro.org/COVID-19. 2 more reminders before we get started. Please fill out your census forms while you're home. The accurate count on that means extra funding for our community. Obviously, we're going to need that when we get to the other side of this, but make sure that you're filling that out. Very, very important in terms of representation and a number of other federal programs that utilize that census data to dole out, whether it be a voting situation, whether it be a resource situation, that sort of thing. So we want to make sure that you're filling that out as well. And then, of course, as always, give blood. We're hearing from our hospitals that there is an urgent need for blood. That's always the case, even more so in a situation like this. So please go out and do that when you get a chance. It is my honor and pleasure to be joined today by Brince Manning of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. He is the manager for the Southeast Region for the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. He supports the congressional and public affairs for 8 southeastern states: Alabama, Florida, Georgia, Mississippi, North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee, and Virginia. The mission of that Southeastern Regional Office is to develop and maintain the region's legislative, political, and grassroots resources to achieve the U.S. Chamber's public policy goals. Before joining the U.S. Chamber, he was the manager of government affairs for the Jacksonville Chamber in Jacksonville, Florida. And he's also a University of North Georgia alumnus, and he lives in Atlanta currently. The U.S. Chamber's been involved since day one on the COVID-19 response at the federal level, the resources that are being provided. Were very instrumental in the CARES Act. And so it's my Pleasure to welcome Brent's, excuse me, Brent's. We've got a Brent and we've got a Brent, so we'll try not to try not to confuse everything. But Brent's, I've just unmuted you. Welcome to the call. We appreciate you being with us.
Thank you so much, Brent, and thank you all to all of your members that are here. I know this is an uneasy time for business owners and uncertainty and a high level of anxiety. So I appreciate you being here, and hopefully, I know you guys know a little bit about the CARES Act, but hopefully, I can shed some more light on it as well. So, just to give you an idea of the scale of this, this was or is a $2 billion package. I'm sorry, trillion, 2 trillion, just under 10% of our regular GDP in this country. This package was designed to be robust because the idea is that this is the bridge that helps us avoid a prolonged recession and downturn and allows that once regular commerce can begin resuming, we can get back to normal, a sense of normalcy. Next slide, please. So in addition to the $2 trillion face value of the deal, because some of the funds can be used by the Federal Reserve, it can be leveraged to provide an additional $4 trillion in support for the economy. We'll talk a little bit about the individual provisions. Perhaps most important, the automatic payments that the federal government is making to individual taxpayers. They will begin the process of direct depositing these funds to taxpayers across the country. The amount is $1,200 per individual, $2,400 for joint returns, plus $500 per child. And it begins to phase out for incomes above $75,000 for individuals and $150,000 in joint income. We already know, as you saw last week, over 3 million initial unemployment claims. And as much as we can do to support business, we're going to see a rise in unemployment regardless. And so this bill includes some fairly robust expansions of unemployment benefits. Most importantly, most restrictions on eligibility for unemployment. Remember, if you go through unemployment, applying for assistance, there are all these qualifications about how long you were employed, how long you've been unemployed, how long you have to wait, etc. Those eligibility requirements have been amended as it's related to the coronavirus. In addition, the federal government is providing another $600 on top of the regular state benefits through July the 31st. States simply have to agree to accept this additional benefit for their residents. And I'd be shocked if a single state declined. I know there are a lot of questions about whether or not individuals will remain on unemployment, particularly given this enhanced benefit. So it's important to remember that eligibility ends when an individual can return to work. So if an employer is reopening and calling employees back, that employee is available to work but chooses not to, their individual eligibility ends. How do you access this? So this still goes through your state unemployment office, not the federal government. So nothing has changed on that front. It's still through the state. Okay, let's move on to the major provisions for employers. So let's talk about this. We've really broken them down into three groups: the provisions that are available for all employers, the provisions available for larger employers, and then small business, self-employed, independent contractors, and nonprofits, which is where we'll spend the bulk of our time today. We'll start with the provisions that are available for all employees, which will be on the next slide, please. The first is the payroll tax provision for employers who pay payroll taxes. So think about this. Everyone who's writing a check to their employees, after you write that check, you normally write another check to the federal government covering the payroll taxes for both the employee and the employer side. Under this bill, an employer may choose to delay their payment of their
Got somebody doing a presentation
uh,
here.
So under this bill, an employer may choose to delay their payment of their portion of the payroll taxes, which is 6.2% of Social
Muted
Security
again.
taxes. They can
I'm
delay.
unmuted.
They can delay paying that between now and January 1st, 2021. If they choose to delay that, they have to pay 50% of the accumulated amounts that they would have owed by December 31st, 2021, and the other 50% by December 31st, 2022. There is an important caveat here. This is generally available to all employers except if you have a loan forgiven under the Paycheck Protection Program, which is the small business loan program that I'm going to touch on here in a minute. Other taxes that are important: net operating losses, or NOLs. If you have a business that has an operating loss and you want to be able to use that against prior taxes paid, now operating losses are expanded from 2018, 2019, and 2020, and generally can be carried back 5 years. It also applies to pass-throughs and sole proprietors. If you're a business, this is primarily for corporations that have AMT credits. You can accelerate the recovery of those. You also have the opportunity to increase your interest deductibility from 2019 and 2020, and importantly for restaurants and retail establishments who in the past couple years may have made investments into their property. They can accelerate the recovery of that. All of these provisions are centered really on one idea: to improve the liquidity for employers. At the moment, when employers have no revenue coming in, it's difficult to pay the bills, and all of these provisions give employers greater access to liquidity. It's not, think of it this way: it's not so much about reducing overall taxes as it is timing. Giving employers more access to the cash that they have today to be able to pay their employees. Another provision that's available to all employers is the Employee Retention Credit. Now, this was a late addition to the bill. It was not in the early versions, so it hasn't been getting a ton of attention. The retention credit generally applies to all employers. We're talking about businesses, but also nonprofits, for example, who are fully or partially shut down as a result of the coronavirus, or have a 50% drop in their gross receipts in a quarter, and they're eligible for this until those gross receipts get back up to 80% of their prior year's amounts. So this is designed to help employers who've shut down or lost revenue, but who continue to pay their employees. How much is the tax credit worth? It is 50% of the wages paid by the employer up to $10,000 per employee. That's a fully refundable tax credit. So think about it as a $5,000 tax credit available to the employer. There are special rules for employers with more than 100 employees and employers with less than 100 employees. If you have more than 100 employees, the benefit only applies to employees who you are paying but are not providing services. So if you think about your business is shut down, you've had this drop in revenue, your employee is not working, they're not teleworking, but you can continue to pay them, you can access this credit as a benefit in recognition of the fact that you are in fact paying them. If you have 100 or less employees, the requirement that they not be providing services does not apply. It's available to all the employees you pay during the eligible period. That period being when you're shut down or have this quarter with a drop in gross receipts relative to the prior year. Importantly, again, here the Paycheck Protection Program, that small business loan grant program, if you receive one of those loans, because it can be converted into a grant, you cannot take advantage of the Employee Retention Credit. We understand that employers may have cash flow problems, and one of the things for employers who take advantage of this is we expect the Treasury Department will be providing guidance. In fact, they did late last night, that will allow employers to get an advance on the payment of this credit, which will help employers pay employees today. Okay, moving on to the mid-size and large employers. This bill includes, in total, $500 billion to the Treasury Department to support loans, loan guarantees, and Federal Reserve credit facilities. Federal Reserve credit facilities, you may have read about them or remember them. These are things the Federal Reserve creates, for example, to support commercial money market funds. They do these as a regular course of business when we have a financial crisis. They were used robustly and pretty frequently in 2008. So 454 billion of that 500 billion is directly for businesses at large. There are special programs in there for the airline industry and critical national security businesses that make up the remaining $46 billion. We expect in the coming days, we will see the Federal Reserve issue more guidance about these credit facilities and actually launch them, including the terms and conditions. This will not be a situation where the company goes directly to the Treasury Department or the Federal Reserve. Instead, what the Federal Reserve is doing is supporting financial institutions in the U.S. For them to be able to make more loans available. There are some restrictions to go along. They go along with this in exchange for accepting the benefit that could include stock buybacks by the company and limits on increasing executive compensation, for example. Okay, now on to small businesses, self-employed, independent contractors, and nonprofits. I understand y'all talked about this a little yesterday, so I apologize for repeating some of it, but this is the provision that's getting the most attention in the entire now law. It's $349 billion in small business loans for small businesses that are generally defined as employers with less than 500 employees, 501c3s, the self-employed, sole proprietors, and independent contractors. A way of thinking about this, if your business is generally qualified for an SBA program, you're going to qualify for this one as well. In addition to that, some employers who would not qualify have been added to the list, including, for example, independent contractors and self-employed. It also includes restaurants and hotel businesses who would otherwise be ineligible because if you add up all their locations, they're way more than 500 employees. Under this bill, it says we're going to judge you in the accommodation and in the food service business on a per location basis. So please don't automatically assume because you're not eligible for a regular SBA program that you're not eligible for this program either. How much can you borrow? You can borrow up to 2.5 months of your average payroll expenses. There's a formula to calculate that. Once you get that, you multiply it by 2.5. But the loan cannot exceed $10 million. You will not go to the SBA. You will go to your local and national lenders who y'all already know. Lenders who are already SBA 7A lenders and participate in that program are automatically qualified to provide these loans. In addition, the Treasury Secretary is giving authority to additional lenders as well. And I think that was coming out today. I have not seen the list. Maybe Brent has a list of local lenders. So you're going to see that. I mean, this is a general loan. It's backed 100% by the federal government. So I expect it should not be too difficult to get this loan. There are very minimal requirements as far as underwriting these loans. There's no collateral required, no personal guarantee required, and the unique feature of this loan is that it can convert into grants based on what the borrower spends money on. The way the bill is laid out, it looks at the 8 weeks of your expenses after the date of origin of the loan, origination of the loan, I should say. And you get to tally up everything that you spent on payroll, that you spent on rent for the business, interest on mortgages tied to the business, utilities, all that, and you can get dollar for dollar forgiveness of the loan up to that amount. There are some conditions. Your loan forgiveness is reduced proportionately if you reduce the number of FTEs that you had relative to a benchmark period, either the year before, all of 2019, or the first 2 months of this year. So the loan forgiveness is also reduced if you reduce wages for employees making less than $100,000 by more than 25%. A quick note on the $100,000. In calculating your payroll expenses, you get to count the first $100,000 you paid an employee, but nothing beyond that. This is really targeted at those middle income earners. Employers can also avoid a reduction in the forgiveness if they bring back employees and restore their wages by June the 30th of this year. So let's see. If you think about it, you've laid off employees or reduced wages. This is going to help get you through that. If you made this is a little in the weeds, so if I lose you, I'm sorry. If you've made those reductions between February the 15th and April the 26th of this year, you'll need to restore those workers or bring them back up to their previous wages by June the 30th in order for your loan to be forgiven as a grant. Additionally, after April the 26th, you cannot make any changes to your number of employees or wages until after June the 30th to be forgiven. Now, if you laid off an employee or reduced hours before February 15th, you do not have to restore them to qualify for forgiveness. We often get asked, what if the business is shut down, or if you're in a state where the governor has said you need to close. That does not matter for this purpose. What the loan looks at, and the main goal of the bill is, after taking the loan, are you paying your employees? The federal government wants people to stay employed, and they want those paychecks to keep going through the system. On the next slide, you can learn a little bit more about what we've been doing, and I actually encourage you to check out, there's a link. It's a 4-page document that tells you basically, am I eligible? Will help you get through the process of, am I eligible? What will lenders be looking for? How much can I borrow? And when will my loan be forgiven? I encourage you to check that out. I find it very beneficial. In calculating the payroll costs, it talks about not only wages, but employees that rely on tips and vacation, family, medical, sick leave, all that. So it's a pretty good document. All right. Another provision that is available to small businesses, and you probably all know about it, also self-employed independent contractors and nonprofits, is the SBA's Economic Injury Disaster Loans, also known as EIDL loans. EIDL loans have been around for decades. If you've ever had a business affected by a hurricane or tornado, for example, you may have applied for and received an EIDL loan. Small businesses and nonprofits, including faith-based, are eligible. No restrictions on the type of nonprofit. It's any entity that is a nonprofit that has fewer than 500 employees. And again, it also includes sole proprietors and independent contractors. This loan is an actual loan. It does not, in general, convert to a grant. You can borrow up to $2 million in working capital that is to be repaid over 30 years, and you can see the interest rates there. If you take out this loan, payments are deferred for up to a year, so you don't have to immediately start paying on this loan. They've made it easier for individual businesses to apply. Your loan is going to be based on your credit score. You don't have to immediately produce tax returns. You can get up to $200,000 without a personal guarantee. No collateral is required for $25,000 or less. Beyond that, there are general security interests. Sometimes it's secured with real estate, although they are trying to move away from real estate in this particular instance. This is an important feature that's brand new as a result of the CARES Act. If you're applying for an EIDL loan, one of these injury disaster loans, you can request that you be provided an emergency grant, which they have to provide within 3 days. And I know there's some questions out there about that. I'll touch on that later if anybody does have a question. They have to provide within 3 days of up to $10,000. The bill details what you may use the grant for, but there's really no requirement. This $10,000 grant does not have to be repaid, even if you're denied the loan. So if you apply for the loan, you request the emergency grant, you get the emergency grant, then you're denied the loan, you do not have to pay back that $10,000. It's essentially a small business, an emergency grant for small businesses. There are some important interactions with the Paycheck Protection Program that we just talked about. Importantly, for example, if you end up with both, and you generally would end up with both because you already had received the EIDL loan, and maybe now that the Paycheck Protection laws are being set up, and you're applying for that now, you can roll those together, but you can't get double forgiveness on the $10,000. The $10,000 would come off the Paycheck Protection Program's forgiveness. So there are some requirements with respect to the Paycheck Protection loans that you can't double dip as well. You cannot take out 2 loans to pay the same bills. If you're thinking about both of these, you're going to want to think through those restrictions. Don't assume that you can do all these programs and just stack them up. What they have done is make the Paycheck Protection Program by far the most favorable, and then tacked on to other programs that don't avail themselves to the Paycheck Protection loan, including this EIDL loan. And to apply for this, you would go to your local bank. Oh, no, I'm sorry. You would not go to your local bank. This is SBA only. You go to sba.gov. This is one where chambers and 501c6s, I believe, can apply for. I know there's a little confusion right now. We're checking on that. But I know chambers are not open for the Paycheck Protection Program. I do believe they will in the end be open for this. Chambers can also, real quick, receive the employee retention credit, but they have to be substantially shut down or that reduction in revenue relative to the prior period. So you'll want to think through that with the folks that do your taxes. Okay, on to paid sick leave. Now, with respect to small businesses, there are some provisions we've received a lot of questions about that don't come from the CARES Act. They come from the Families First Act, the prior bill, often called the Phase 2 bill. What the Phase 2 bill included was a requirement that employers with less than 500 employees provide paid sick leave, 10 days of paid sick leave, to their employees if it's related to the coronavirus. Sick leave is obviously if you're ill, if you are quarantined, or if you need to take care of a family member who is quarantined, or if you're taking care of a child because of a school or daycare closure. Leave is paid at your regular rate, but it's for a maximum of $511 per day. Unless you're taking care of a family member, then it's at 2/3 the regular rate with a maximum of $200 per day. Importantly, the federal government will reimburse the employer 100% of these costs up to the daily maximum that you pay your employees. This is a refundable tax credit, and understanding that businesses often have liquidity problems as well, the Treasury Department is taking steps to allow businesses to request an advance on that refundable credit so that you can have the resources to pay your employees who are taking sick leave. This is obviously in addition to what the employer already provides, including what you provide pursuant to state or local law. There are a lot of questions out there about businesses with fewer than 50 employees being exempt. The law does not provide, the law does provide that an employer may be exempt, but they can only be exempt with respect to leave that's tied to caring for a child if a school or daycare is closed, and only to the extent that if providing the leave threatens the viability of the business. If you think this applies to you, I encourage you to check out the Department of Labor's website. They post guidelines on there that can explain this further, and I imagine would be helpful to a lot of businesses out there. Finally, paid sick leave is not generally available for an employee where they can telework. That only applies if the employee is taking care of, for example, a child, and they can also telework by staggering or changing their hours. Okay, on to FMLA. The bill also, phase 2 bill also included paid family leave, which is FMLA, which is the Family Medical Leave Act. It is sorry, my dog is annoying me. It's a law that generally allows for 12 weeks of unpaid leave. What the phase 2 bill did say was that employers with less than 500 employees, they are required to provide up to 10 weeks of paid family leave if the employee needs to take care of a child due to the school or childcare closure caused by the coronavirus. That's the only reason for this extended leave. When you think about the interaction between this and the sick leave, an employee would take the 10 days of sick leave first and then be eligible for the 10 weeks of paid leave. Here, paid again, leave is paid at 2/3 the regular rate, a maximum of $200 a day, $10,000 in the aggregate. It's in addition to what you're already providing under state and local law. It's fully reimbursed in the same way by the federal government. If there are similar exemptions for employers with fewer than 50 employees, the same as paid sick leave, and it does not apply to an employee who can telework. And with that, I think the last slide is just about more information. The uschamber.com has bill summaries, other resources that are beneficial. We have this program called CO, which focuses on small business. It has survival guides, tips, and other things that could be beneficial. So I encourage you to check that out as well. And that is pretty much all I have, Brent.
Brince, thank you. I appreciate it. That's a great overview for everyone, and probably for some on this call, a good refresher, because we've been talking about these programs as they have continued to evolve and emerge over the past couple of weeks. So I've got a few questions here. If you don't mind, we can just dive into, and I know that we're not going to hold you to needing to being able to answer all of these questions, but I think we've got some good ones here. First of all, the first ones really talk about the money that's coming directly to individuals and how that calculation is made. Is the income based on your tax return from 2018 or from 19? I guess I'm assuming that it'd be 18, since 19s have not been filed yet, and we've been given more opportunity to do that by the federal government.
Yeah, it's my understanding it's the most recent one that you have filed. So I filed mine in February. I assume they're going to go off of my 2019 return. But if you haven't filed
Gotcha.
yet, there was an extension. If you haven't filed, the last one they would have is 2018.
Gotcha. Yeah. So I'm assuming that it's just based on the record that they've got in at the IRS at this point as to what your income would be.
Yes, sir.
Got an interesting one here. If an employee, as an employer of a one employee S corp, if you get the idle advance and get rejected for the SBA loan, can you still get the employee retention credit?
Ooh, that is a good one. I have not had that question. Give me just a quick second. I think that you can. But let me double check.
Okay.
Yes, you can.
Okay. Good. That's a really easy answer. And here's another one. If an employer cannot bring back all of their employees, would they still qualify for unemployment benefits under the CARES Act?
If they are going for the Paycheck Protection Program.
Yeah. So if you're bringing some back, but not all of them, I'm assuming the question is, well, the ones that you can't bring back they're still eligible for unemployment under the CARES Act, correct?
I believe so. Yes, sir.
Yeah. So I think this one goes back to, again, those individual payments that are being made through the CARES Act. Is there an age restriction for children, 16, 17, 18? I'm assuming that that's just based on a minor dependent is what the per child money would be for.
Yeah, that's right. I think dependents are counted as children.
Gotcha. Here's an interesting one, and one that's kind of come up in some discussions today, Brince, and you may or may not know. Have the detail on this is very technical in terms of the affiliation rule, and I think there are a lot of, especially local entrepreneurs who have investments from either angel investors or some venture capital or that sort of thing. In this affiliation rule, that if you have money that's been invested in your company from a particular entity that also has it invested in several other companies, that affiliation rule may require you to include all those other companies in terms of your employment count, and therefore make you ineligible for this, for the payment protection plan. Are you hearing any concerns about that, and any thoughts on how that might be addressed?
I have not heard any. This has not been brought up to me yet, but I did just do a quick search, and there are some things out there about it. I don't know enough about that. I apologize, but
No worries.
I can try to track down the answer. In fact, like anything I can answer, please send me, and I will
Okay.
track down the answer. For that
Yeah,
one,
that's
I just
that
don't.
one's a yeah. We've had some discussions with our entrepreneurial community, and that one seems to be a pretty interesting discussion. And so we'll hopefully get you to go and get us some answers on that one. And again, if we can make a difference in trying to articulate what we're seeing could be a major issue, we'd be happy to help you with that as well.
Sure. Thank you.
I think you answered this, but just for everybody's sake, and it's probably also addressed in your 4-page document. What's the best way to calculate monthly payroll? Do you take the entire salary from all of 2019 and then divide by 12?
Yeah.
Is that the easiest way to do that?
Well, there are a couple of ways, and it is on that document. In fact, I have the Paycheck Protection Program application up, and I can send that to you to distribute. But
That'd be great.
in terms of the time frame, like the all the different items to include, that is on that document. But in terms of the time frame of calculating that, the application says for purposes of calculating average monthly payroll, most applicants will use the average monthly payroll for 2019 excluding costs over 100,000 for an employee. For seasonal businesses, the applicant may elect to use the average monthly payroll between February 15, 2019 and July 30th, 2019. And if it's a new business, you can use the first 2 months, January 1 of 20 to February 29th of 20, to figure that out.
Okay. So they've taken into account various businesses and their age of their relative age
Yeah.
versus new versus some that are older. Great.
Yeah, and also if your business was closed down, I was talking to a group in Alabama. One of their businesses had shut down for a tornado for 4 months, so they were worried about that. But there are different ways to calculate
Good, good. Is there any indication other than qualification of being a U.S. employee that foreign ownership would be a disqualification for any of these programs?
I don't think it is. The only thing I know about that is that the employee must reside in the United States, their primary residence. As far as ownership, I can't say, honestly, I can't say 100%. I don't think that's a problem, but I will check on that and get back to you.
Okay, super. Here's one that's interesting. If you're a franchisee for a franchise that's not on the SBA franchise directory, are you eligible for the PPP? That's a pretty technical question there. I'm not sure you might have the answer to that, but what is your thought on that?
I think you are, because they expanded the lists. And remember, they are now judging, like, all of Hilton can't, ordinarily would not be eligible, but now they're doing more on a case by case basis, on a location by location basis. So I think that in this situation, you would be eligible for the PPP.
Gotcha. Good, good. Here's one that's about unemployment. I think we may need to refer this person to the Department of Labor, or maybe to the local one, but very interesting situation. Can an individual qualify for unemployment if they put in 2-week notice at one job to take another job? So now they're off the payroll with one, and their second job, it keeps extending the start date due to COVID-19, right? So they were getting ready to start a new job. That job is now continues to be extended. For instance, the original start date was March 30th, and now indefinite. What are your thoughts on that? That may be one we need to send on to Department of Labor.
Well, DOL would have they know much more than I, but I would think that until that start date actually arrives, you should be able to apply for unemployment and get those additional benefits. Because remember, once the employer calls the employee in to start working, that's when those benefits end.
Gotcha.
It's my understanding, as long as you're waiting for that start date, you are eligible for the unemployment benefits.
You talked about this in your presentation, but it sounds like we need a little bit of a clarification for the $10,000 emergency grant from the SBA disaster loan. What are the restrictions on what those funds could be used for? What is the intention for companies to be using those funds for?
Yeah, let me see. It's generally, I have this somewhere. I don't know if it was in the presentation or not. It's generally for payroll for. In fact, actually, there are no restrictions. I mean, there are guidelines as to what to use it for, but there really, honestly, is no restriction on that emergency $10,000 grant.
Gotcha. So that's something that I think a lot of businesses are going to want to explore. And of course, as you said, you can't get $10,000 from that and then stack it with the PPP.
Yeah.
It's going to be taken off of your PPP if you've done that program and then apply for PPP, right?
Yeah. So one thing that I would tell your members is that PPP is by far the better deal if you can get it. I mean, if you spend the money the right way, you're getting free money. Now that is not the case with the idle loans, except
Right.
that initial 10,000 that you may get. But the main part of the idle loan is a loan. I mean, it does not convert into a grant. So the way the bill was written, they want people to take advantage of the Paycheck Protection Program first, and then look elsewhere as a backup.
Gotcha. And so here's my own question in this. So say I'm a restaurant. I have shut down, or any business that has shut down. I'm going to stay shut down, even though I'm going to apply for PPP. I'm going to bring everybody back on payroll for those 8 weeks so that I can get that money forgiven. I don't have to open still at that point, right? I can still stay closed, but still apply, and if I do things right, still have that money for that loan forgiven. Correct?
Yes, absolutely, 100%. That is the goal, really, of the bill. It's
Right.
whether your doors are open or not. It's to get the money to your employees, whether they're working or not.
Right. Same thing with the idle loan. I've got a great question here. Is for that $10,000, do you have to maintain any level of employment? Um, what are the requirements there? If you get
Yeah.
an idle loan, is there an employment level requirement in that?
No, I don't believe there is. There's not for the emergency grant, and I don't believe there is for a traditional idle loan either.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
Now,
Very good.
to be honest, I mean, if you're looking at either of these or any of these, you're going to want to talk to your lenders first and foremost, and also the SBA. Do y'all have a pretty good SBDC office there?
We do. We
Yeah,
do. We've got we've got the links to those offices on our web page that's devoted to COVID-19, so people can go find those as well.
yeah, definitely talk to those. I mean, don't listen. Like, don't take my advice. I'm just a poor old lobbyist, but you definitely want to talk to the experts. Run the numbers several different ways, um, before you jump into anything.
Okay. Another very similar question to the previous question. You had a recent employee retire, and they were about to rehire a new employee. Would they be eligible? And I'm trying to figure out would they be eligible. I would assume for unemployment at that point. And I assume that the answer is very similar to the previous question. Yes, they would
Uh,
be eligible.
in relation to the new employee, yes.
Correct. Correct. They were about to rehire, didn't or about to hire a new employee, did not hire them.
Yeah, no, they that employee can file for unemployment, and that should not affect the business's calculation in that getting dinged by that
Right.
equation.
Right. Got it. One more question from me that I want you to help me put some things to rest because the mill always runs strong in these times when things are moving very quickly. Um, there was word on the street or some big rumor going around that hey, they're going to open up this portal for this $350 million worth of small business money, and it'll be gone by the end of the day, or it'll be gone by the end of Monday, or it'll be gone. It's going to get used up quick, so get in there fast. Um, what are your thoughts on that? Is this $350 million enough?
I think it is enough. So that they picked that amount for a reason. That is the average payroll costs over all of the United States small businesses over a 2 month period. So, in fact, it may be over a quarter. But they have picked that number for a reason. It will not run out on Monday or today at 5. You do have some time, but if you want to go in there Wednesday to figure this out, there will still be money. Don't worry about that.
And I think when we talked earlier, some of your advice to small business owners was similar to what we're talking about and everything with this pandemic is don't panic. Take some time Make sure you're getting all of your paperwork together properly. Make sure that you're calculating things properly. That the better your application is when you go in, the easier the process is going to be. Is that the advice you're giving to folks at this point?
It is, yes. Know what you're getting into. Know what you have to do on the back end to get it forgiven. If you are going the PPP route, you need to, spend this weekend, the next few days, and really think about it. And again, run through the numbers before you jump into anything. Don't leave this meeting and go straight to your lender without doing that.
Very good. Very good. That's great advice. Super advice. Brince, I can't thank you enough. This has been one of our longest calls to date. I think that's because it's been filled with a lot of great information. A lot of folks that, for no fault of their own, are just now coming to the table and saying, okay, I've gotten through that first kind of shock and awe portion of what we're going through. I'm ready to dig in for the next phase of this, and I'm ready to see what I can get out of the federal government to help me through that. And that's exactly what these funds and what these resources are meant to do. So thank you for laying it all out there for us, for answering some really good questions. And we'll follow up with you on those couple that we couldn't get we couldn't get answers to, and make sure that we include those in email form and on our website for those who asked the question and we couldn't get the answers to.
Yep, sounds great. Looking forward to getting those questions, and I'll get them back to you as soon as I can.
Brince, we appreciate your time very much. Thank you. Thank you to the U.S. Chamber for everything that you're doing for us. Folks, it is Friday, almost 4 o'clock, and then almost 5 o'clock as well. So have a great rest of your Friday. Have a great weekend. We'll talk again on Monday, and we'll have some more talk about some programs available for small business out there on a local level. And we're also working to see if we can't get somebody from Cone Health to talk a little bit about the situation in terms of community health right now in the Greensboro area. So we're going to have another great opportunity on Monday to get together at 3. Until then, I hope everybody has a great weekend. Brince, have a great weekend. Enjoy yourself. And again, thanks for everything.
Thank you so much. See y'all.
Take care, everyone. Have a great weekend. Bye now.
This podcast is brought to you by Truliant Federal Credit Union. As one of the largest credit unions in North Carolina, Truliant is proud of its work supporting the businesses and the people that make our communities thrive. Chartered in 1952, today Truliant serves more than 250,000 members, helping them and our community build strong financial foundations. There are 5 locations in Guilford County to serve you. Visit Truliant.org for more information. You can find all of our episodes on YouTube thanks to our video sponsor, North State. Impact the Borough is recorded at Press Play Studios. Producers are Brody Cohen-Glaze and Holly West. You can follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at GSO Chamber. See you next time.